Hi everyone, and welcome to my Tuesday's traveling tips. Today we're going to talk about passports. And please excuse me, I'm going to be looking at my notes because there's so much information here. Now I know we've talked about passports both in my blog and in my newsletters, and I've talked about it a lot on my VIP squad page. But there's still a lot of confusion, and quite honestly, there's a lot of anxiety right now since the passport office is closed. So I'm hopping on here today to talk about this, and hopefully we'll clear some of these things up. So the first question I always hear is, do I need a passport? And it really depends on your situation. So if you are a U.S. citizen that is traveling outside of the country, then obviously you must have a passport, and it's important to carry it. All right. And one of the things that we hear, this would definitely be the most popular question, is if I'm taking a cruise, do I need a passport? And it's really kind of simple. If you are boarding a cruise ship in the United States and you're going to disembark at the end of your cruise in the United States, at a port in the United States, then that's called a closed loop, and you don't need a passport. Okay, you will need some type of documents proving your identity and your citizenship, but you don't need a passport. If you're going to do a closed port, you'll need two documents. One is some type of proof of identity, such as a valid driver's license, military ID card, or a valid government-issued ID, and a document proving your citizenship, such as a notarized copy of your birth certificate or something issued by the U.S. state. Hospital issued birth certificates, voter registration cards, and that kind of affidavits cannot be used as identification. If you were born in the United States, carrying a valid U.S. passport is your best option to prove your citizenship. Okay. So if you're going on a closed loop, getting on the ship in the United States, getting off the ship in the United States, you don't need a passport. Now, there is a requirement that was supposed to start October 1st of this year that would require a real ID compliant driver's license if you were traveling on airplanes, okay, within the United States, okay? And that has been extended because of all the mess. This has been extended until October 1st, 2021. As of that date, you will need to have a real ID compliant driver's license, U.S. passport, U.S. military ID, or other accepted identification to get on a plane in the United States. All right. You can find out what documents you'll need in order to get that real ID compliant driver's license by visiting your state's Division of Motor Vehicles. Okay. Now, if you are boarding the ship in a U.S. port and disembarking in a foreign port, that let's say you are getting on the ship in New York and you're sailing to Barcelona and getting off and flying home, you will have to have a passport because that's an open loop on in the United States, off in a foreign country. That's an open loop, and you will have to have a U.S. passport. How about if you're taking an Alaska trip? Gets a little catchy here. If you are boarding, say, in Seattle and coming back to Seattle or getting off in Anchorage, then that's a closed loop because it's still U.S. territory. However, if you're getting on in Seattle and disembarking in Victoria, Canada, you'll have to have a passport. So just remember, if you're getting on and off within the United States, no passport needed. On or off in a foreign port, need to have a passport. Okay, so there's two really important things to remember, though. So say you don't have to have a passport. Okay, the first one is if you are on a cruise and for whatever reason you need to fly home, you got sick, you were injured. Somebody in your party with you got sick and injured and everybody has to fly home for medical care, or someone at home gets sick or injured or God forbid dies and you have to get home. you can't get on a plane back to the United States without a passport. And so that would mean that you'd have a delay waiting for someone at home to mail you your passport if you had one, or for the U.S. Embassy to confirm your identity and be able to issue you temporary identification to fly home. That's a terrible delay during a time that you are really stressed out, and you don't need that. So I have to tell you, passport's the best way to go. I always recommend to my clients that you have a passport. One of the waivers that I require is that if you don't have a passport, that you have gone to the government State Department website and read all the requirements and provisions and the cans and cannots before I'll book your travel, because I don't want you to get stuck someplace and then, say, Terry told me. So yeah, I always say, get a passport, okay? Now, there's one other thing about passports, and a lot of people don't know this. Of course, if you're working with me as your travel advisor, you're going to know, all right? Your passport has to remain valid for up to 6 months from your date of return, all right? So if you are going someplace on a trip and you're going to be return home on June 1st, your passport has to be valid up until December 1st, okay? Otherwise, you're going to be denied passage. And can you imagine if you get to the cruise terminal and you're getting ready to get on that ship and you are finally going on a cruise after all this stuff, and you find out you can't because your passport is going to expire within that 6 months after your return period. Let's not do that, okay? Now, having said what the requirements are, here comes the tricky part. There's so much anxiety going on right now. For people who have to get their passport either for the first time because they're going to be traveling, or because they need to renew your passport. All right. Make sure that you go on the State Department's passport website so you know all the requirements about what you're going to need in order to get that passport. But here's the problem. Because of COVID-19, the State Department has temporarily suspended expedited passport processing and restricted their service only to life or death emergencies, okay? So you put your application in, it's not going to get processed for a while. The State Department employees who process passports can't process those applications from home, which is where they're working, because of security and privacy, all right? And that makes sense. I don't want, somebody's kid being able to see all of our important information. So that includes, if you've already applied prior to March 1st, or since March 1st, or prior to, those applications that had not been processed as of March 1st are just sitting in queue. All right, they're not going to be processed anytime until the State Department opens again. They're just sitting there. So it doesn't even make any difference if you had submitted an expedited application prior. If it hadn't been processed by March 1st, it's not getting done. It's just sitting. They expect to reopen the processing procedures in a 3-phase system starting this summer. And it's part of the State Department's Diplomacy Strong Plan, so you can check online about that. And it follows the guidelines of the CDC, of course. So every passport acceptance center and agency will phase in on a different date based on what their conditions are, okay? So, can you apply now and just go into the queue to be processed when they start their service again? Until recently, like within the last week or so, the State Department was asking people not to send their applications in until they had announced that they had restarted the processing procedures, open for business. Okay, so they were asking you not to do that, and I put that word out on my VIP squad. All right, don't send it in. But they are now saying that you can apply for a new or renewed passport, but your application will not be processed until they resume business. All right, and you're gonna experience major delays before you get your passport, and they will not even provide an estimated processing time commitment until the third and final phase of their reopening has been completed. Now, if you need to apply in person, that would be for children under 16 and new applicants. You can apply at an acceptance facility. That's a post office, a library, clerk of court, if they are open. So they're advising you to contact one of those agents, any one of those places, to make sure they're open before you go and try to apply. And you can also apply at the post office, as always, but you will need to go on to the post office website to see whether or not that particular post office is opening. So you can go to the USPS.com website and verify whether the post office is open or not. You can also still apply by mail. Again, that's a change from what we were saying a couple of weeks ago. But again, if it's not a life or death emergency, you're going to see major delays, and there will be no way of finding out how long the passport's going to take to process it, and no way of finding out whether your application actually made it into the State Department and is sitting in the queue. They just can't cope with those extra things. So you don't need to renew your passport before it expires, unless you're planning on traveling internationally or doing getting on a plane outside of the United States, or doing an open loop cruise. All right. You do have up to 5 years from the time your passport expires before you have to renew it. And anything once that 5 years passes, then you just have to start like you're brand new. Okay. And again, most countries are requiring that your U.S. passport remain valid up till at least 6 months from your return date. Now, because the State Department is reopening in phases and will not have full service and staffing during the summer, they won't immediately offer upgraded expedited services, and they will not be able to commit to a specific processing time for routine service. Hopefully, that's a lot of stuff, and it's confusing, right? Good thing I put it on this video, because you can rewind me, all right? So hopefully this clears up some of the confusion and anxiety you might have about your passport as we begin traveling again. Thank you, thank you. And as always, if you have a question, please contact your travel advisor. And if you don't have one, well, give me a call. I'll be glad to help you. All right? In this case, ignorance is not bliss. So don't think that you can just show up at the airport getting ready to fly to Rome, or at the cruise terminal, and you're going to be doing an open loop cruise and say, I don't know. You can cry and have a fit and have temper tantrum all you want. You're not going anywhere. All right? So that's it for today. Be sure to tune in on Thursday for my Terrific Destinations episode, and come back and see me every Tuesday for my more travel tips. And as always, I appreciate so much when you show a little love by liking this episode, and I love to hear your comments. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes, be sure to subscribe, and that way you'll get a notification each time I post a new one. So until Thursday, see you soon. Bye-bye.